Hayley from Chameleon Safety Services in Tamworth. Chameleon's been around for 3 years now, and I just wanted to explain a little bit of the theory behind me doing this. When I came into health and safety many years ago, that it was an absolute minefield for companies to know where to go to find out what it is they needed to do as a starter for 10. So there's the HSE website and there's lots and lots of different other resources, but there's nowhere comprehensive where you can go to find out where to start. And as part of Chameleon, since I started, I've wanted to give something back each year, whether it be time or resources, and such like to local businesses. So this is just an extension of that, really, in terms of trying to help small and micro businesses understand what they can do to help themselves in respect of health and safety duty. And that has a double function, really. Yes, it protects our employees, their health, safety and welfare, but it can also help protect your company as well. And I'm a big fan of trying to help companies be as robust as possible and have longevity, because it contributes to our local economy, our local towns, to get them thriving. It creates better jobs for our friends and family. It just means that we have safer workplaces. So this is the things that you can do in-house to help yourselves that should be relatively cost-free or low cost, and don't need an expert or an external consultant or anybody else to help you. But it will drive down that risk level in your business and make you more likely to succeed. It also safeguards you against employee claims and things such as if you had to claim on your insurance because of fire. Because if you don't have these things in place and you don't comply with the law, then quite often they won't pay out. And most small and medium businesses and micro businesses wouldn't be able to survive something that drastic happening. So let's go. First of all, the first top mistake that most companies make with their health and safety is not knowing the law. Now, this is super important. I've just mentioned about Health and Safety at Work Act and it covering other people, not just employees. But you have to appreciate that as a business, one person upwards, you have legal duties, and that is to make sure that you keep people safe. So you can't hurt anybody or make anybody ill through what you do. And if you don't protect your work operations correctly and you hurt somebody, then you could be prosecuted for that as well. So noise, dust, vibration, allergies, contaminating something, causing harm to anybody in any way because of your business operations, you could be prosecuted for. Now, how that looks for you is vast, and it depends on what type of business you've got, the areas that you work and the type of trade that you do. But there are generally, once you know this and it highlights the fact to you that you have legal duty, you can go away and try to research things that are specific to you. So first and foremost, start with the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, and it says that you must have certain things in place, which we'll come on to later on. Number 2 is not having a fire risk assessment. So if you have a premises or you conduct events or you go anywhere outside to have a little stall, whether it be indoors or outdoors, if you have an event or you have a premises, you must have a fire risk assessment in place by law, and it has to be written down. It used to be the case that until you had 5 or more employees, you didn't have to write your fire risk assessment down, but now you do. And that changed with the Building Safety Act coming in 2022, which was a fallout of Grenfell, which improved the standards and practices of fire safety. That fire risk assessment has to be done by a competent person. So you need to know enough about fire, how it happens, what causes it, what controls it, and the regulations surrounding that to know what to put in place for your individual circumstances. Number 3 is not supplying suitable and sufficient training to your employees. So if you employ somebody on payroll, you must provide them with training to do their job. Everybody. Now, if that's somebody that works in an office, it could just be a manual handling awareness briefing or toolbox talk and a display screen equipment self-assessment, so that by using their computer, they're trained and aware of the hazards from that. but it could be much, much more, and it very much depends on what you do. But it would cover everything that you are asking them to do from a commercial perspective. If you are paying them to do a role, you must make sure that they have suitable and sufficient training to do that job, and that includes giving duties to line managers, supervisors and team leads. It's not just a natural progression of this person's been with the company 10 years, so we think that we've given them in as many pay rises as we can now before calling them a supervisor, so we're going to promote them. You can't do that without giving them the right training. All through policies in business, normally we say consult your line manager, but we don't give the line managers any training to know how they're supposed to deal with those queries. And you need to know about the Equality Act if you're a line manager, how to treat people that report to you fairly, what the requirements are in terms of your own responsibilities in law, and becoming an extension of the company itself, communicating good practice, acting in accordance with policies, and having a lead by example approach. And you need to make sure you give your staff that training. And the biggest thing with training that is absolutely prevalent, I'd almost say rife, in small companies, is staff being expected to complete training in their own time or without pay. It is illegal. You cannot do that. If your employees need training to carry out their role, you provide it to them, you must pay for it, and you must give them sufficient time to complete it in work time as well. It doesn't mean to say that you can't say to somebody, I want you to do this from home. You can, but you need to allow them the extra cost, the extra salary to cover the hours that's reasonably expected to carry out that course. Number 4, not having a suitable induction in place. Now, there are several things that have to be covered when an employee very first starts work. Nothing that comprehensively says every single thing that you need to include, but throughout the different regulations and pieces of legislation, there are mentions of at first employment you must provide, and that means when you induct somebody, we're talking about preparing them for working within your environment and your workplace. And all of this applies to home workers, remote workers, as well as workers that might come into an office or work out on the road in cars. And we must make sure that we include certain fire safety information upon first employment, which includes the hazards of any workplace, what to do in the event of a fire, where to go, and if they've got any special duties. You must include any no-go areas, anything that you don't expect them to do, and really outline that expectation. But one of the other things that is very often missed is medical declarations. Now, there is a two-pronged attack for this. Employees quite often feel like this is invasive, but you are required by law to ask. Now, when you ask about medical conditions, illnesses, disabilities, anything like that, you have a duty for anything that is declared to make sure that that person is then suitably risk assessed, or that their activities are changed and reasonable adjustment is made where needed if it is required. An employee has no legal responsibility in most cases to declare anything on this form, and that is their right under their personal information. However, if you ask the question and the employee does not state something on a medical declaration that could affect their role or could be made worse because of their activities at work, you can't reasonably be expected to risk assess against that because you didn't know. However, if somebody doesn't state something on the medical declaration form but then talks about it every day whilst they're at work, you need to be having that person in for a chat and saying that you're aware, getting them to sign the declaration and following this process anyway, because they are verbally letting you know. And quite often this happens with events that have happened after the medical declaration. So employees will have something new come up and they'll talk verbally about it to their colleagues or their line manager, but they won't have declared it on a medical declaration. And even if we put the caveat on there that they must notify you of any change in circumstance, quite often that doesn't happen. So be aware of capturing those things. The other thing is that you need to refresh that annually. It's our duty to go back and just prompt and make sure that we're asking employees to notify of us any changes to their circumstances. And the reason for this is because we say that we'll review our risk assessments annually. We can't review risk assessments annually if we haven't got up-to-date information, because you'd just be basing it on old things. The two reasons for this, which I mentioned, are: one, from an employee perspective, we have a legal duty to protect our employees. You can't safeguard them against hazards that could make something worse if we haven't asked them the questions. So if, for instance, you have somebody that declares that they have asthma, and then we're going to put them into an environment which is dusty, somebody with asthma would require additional levels of control. But it could also be that there are hazardous substances in the workplace that specifically state that this is a substance that must not be worked with if somebody has asthma or any respiratory problems. So you need to be aware of those things so that you can start tying together the pieces of the puzzle. And medical declarations are the first thing to start with when somebody very first gets employed by the company. Now, I mentioned there's a two-pronged attack to this. The second one is business protection. Some people would call that covering. I don't. It's an absolute necessity. And if we're going to protect our employees, then why shouldn't we protect the business as well? We need our employees to tell us about these things so that we can make adequate protection of them, and also make sure that we have baseline levels. So if somebody was to declare on a medical declaration that they have hearing loss, we need a snapshot in time of where they are at the moment, so that we know what controls to put in place, but also so that if anything got made worse throughout the course of their employment, we would know where they started from. If, for instance, let's say you have a business and you're not currently getting medical declarations from your staff, and a company like me comes in and we do an audit and we say, okay, but because you're working with substances, nail bars, hair salons, take note, that could be irritants, cause respiratory tract issues, or could be carcinogenic, or could cause skin issues like dermatitis, then if we don't know where that person started from, we can't say what has and hasn't been caused through the course of their employment, which would generally mean that if there is a chance that anything that they're working with could have caused this, you will be found liable. One of the other things that links into this is claims, and it's a dirty word, nobody likes it. Injury claims, no win, no fee. Bang a claim in, we're pretty sure we can help you. And the reason for that is the law. So as you and I walk around as general citizens in life, we are innocent until proven guilty in any court of law. The problem is for businesses is that this is the reverse. For a business case, we are guilty until proven innocent. So it's not very nice, but it is the reason why the blame culture has become so prevalent, because most companies don't have in place policies and the procedures and safe systems of work that they should have, and then they don't document it very well if they have. So one of my jobs is to help you protect your business, and that is what one of the main reasons of today was for. Number 5 is not having your policies in place. It leads really nicely into what I've just said. So protecting your business is about having policies in place, and I don't mean a document. A policy is not a document. It is a documented pledge. The document is the outcome of us doing what we're supposed to do. So when you have a policy for a business, it is your pledge that you understand the law and the steps that you're going to put in place to make sure that you operate within that law. Now, health and safety policy generally would cover 3 sections. It would be your statement. We understand what our duties are, and these are the overview of the things that we're going to do. Section 2 would be who's responsible and how the organisation is organised. Section 3 is the arrangements, which details significant hazards of your business. So if you were a hair salon, it would be protection of the public using chemicals and substances, slips, trips and falls, suitable and sufficient training. And there are some mandatory ones that go in there from the Health and Safety at Work Act as well that apply to all companies. So safe plant and equipment. So portable appliance testing is one way of making sure that you've got a schedule of inspection for your electricals. If you were to provide hair dryers, tongs, anything like that to your staff or anybody that you rent a chair to in a salon, and you haven't tested them, and that electrocutes somebody or gives somebody an electric shock, you'll be liable. So all of that gets covered in your policy, and then that becomes your pledge. It is a statement from you as a business that that is what you will do, and then you have to comply with that. So it's not just a document that we get on Google, we copy and paste, we change the name, and then we put it in a folder, never to be seen again, because it doesn't mean anything. So health and safety policy for any business only has to be written down when you've got 5 or more employees, but it's very hard to demonstrate what you have in place if you don't write it down. If you choose not to write it down, what you need to be able to do is converse that policy as though it was written. So if the HSE or the Environment Agency or the local council or food hygiene inspectorate came to your premises and they asked you what your health and safety policy was, you would have to be able to say, well, we don't have a written health and safety policy. However, I can explain that we're aware of the Health and Safety at Work Act and what we must do. I'm the responsible person for health and safety within the organisation, and these are the arrangements we have in place for managing it. Hence why I say it's far easier to write it down. And it should ideally, once it's written down, be signed by a director and reviewed every 12 months as well. So they're your top 5. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on each point. Now, the way that that protects your business is that you have documented policies in place. You follow them because that's your pledge and that's what a policy is for. You make sure then that the people that work for you are aware of them, and you make them also aware that it's their duty to conduct themselves in accordance with your policies. In the Health and Safety at Work Act, it isn't all about your duties, it's about employees' duties as well. So if you make sure that your employees are aware, they have to comply with any reasonable requests that you make by law, and employees can be prosecuted as well for not upholding their part of the Health and Safety at Work Act. So some of the duties that employees have is to keep themselves safe and ensure the safety of anybody else by their actions. They must make sure that they comply with any reasonable request from you, carry out their tasks in accordance with any training that you've given them. So all these things can only be done by your employees if you've got your steps in place first. The next one is risk assessment. So it's the same process as your health and safety policy. It is not a document, it's a process that you have to go through that we then document. So a risk assessment is a process of you identifying hazards, making sure that you know how they could cause harm and who they might cause harm to, and then making sure that you put control measures, as we call them, in place, steps, to reduce the risk down to an acceptable level. So if, for instance, you have identified that in an office environment you might have a slips and trips hazard, the risk from that is that they could have broken bones. So we've done the how, we know what injuries it might cause. Is it visitors? Is it employees? Is it subcontractors? Who else do you have coming to your office environment? Because it's all those people that would be affected as well. Now, some people have a higher hazard perception than others. People that work in that office environment all the time will understand the hazards better than somebody coming in as a visitor. One of the easiest things to do is eliminate the hazard. So we use things like cable management to make sure that cables are routed around the outside of the room and that we don't trail cables across the floor. And that is one that means that we can protect people that are working there all the time and anybody else that comes into the area from the hazard, because we've eliminated it, we've got rid. So just examples, and that's just slips and trips, but you must feel that you have the confidence, the training, the skills and the qualifications in some instances to be able to identify all the hazards that come with you running your business. Even if you have the simplest of business, I can promise you there are still going to be a list of hazards, and you need to be able to be confident that you can identify those and control them, and the control measures must be in accordance with the regulations and what they state. Things like computer users. If you have people working in an office and they use computers more than an hour a day, they need to be trained on the hazards of using that computer. You would normally carry out a display screen equipment awareness and assessment so that you can go through the motions of checking that their setup is correct. And then by law, you must make them aware that they are entitled to an eye test paid for by you, by the company. So you must make sure that you notify your employees that they're entitled to an eye test. If they don't want to take you up on it, that's fine, but you must be able to demonstrate that you have told them. So risk assessments is a big one, and it's the same as the health and safety policy. If you haven't got 5 employees or more, you don't need to write it down. It is very, very hard to be able to demonstrate to anybody that's asking how you risk assess if you haven't got it written down, and you're more likely to forget things. And then when you come to reviewing these annually, which you should do, you aren't going to remember what you wrote down last time, or be able to see any significant changes that have happened. So I'm always an advocate of writing it down from the beginning. If you grow and you get to 5 people, you will be introducing another new process at that point, which essentially, if you start to do that now whilst your business is very small and very easy to manage, you won't have that. By the time you get to 5 employees, it'll be an embedded process, and it'll make it far easier for you to grow. Trying to retrospectively implement big changes, policies and procedures and processes when your team is growing is incredibly hard. So the more that you can do now, it can grow with you as you grow, and it becomes far easier. The next one is training and supervision, which I think we've pretty much covered off. Most people 9 times out of 10 need manual handling training or awareness. And by training, I don't mean putting somebody on a full day's course. It has to be proportionate to what they do. So somebody lifting things on a construction site are not going to have the same level of training as somebody in an office. It would be completely different. And some things need formal training. So if you're using certain types of equipment, such as working at height access equipment, scissor lifts, cherry pickers, mobile tower scaffolds, then you need training for all of these things, and it has to be a certain type of training. First aid, fire marshals possibly, driver awareness. So if somebody drives every day of their life and have done for 30 years, that's great. But if they drive for you for a living or as part of their role, it becomes a different thing. And you need to be able to demonstrate that you've given them an awareness on what your expectations are. No road rage, driving economically, how to sit properly in the car. All these things become the responsibility of the company when they're doing it as a work function. Lone working if they drive in the car a lot. Estate agents going out to people's properties. Risk assessments needed for that. Maybe violence awareness and how to deal with threatening behaviour. There's so much that goes into that section on training and supervision. And when you go to write your risk assessments, you will naturally want to pick up on training as a control measure. And if you haven't got it in place, you can't put it in there. Another one is supervision. We're required by law to provide adequate supervision to our employees, which means if you have subcontractors working for you, do they need supervision to make sure that they're working safely? If you have somebody that's not qualified or that is perhaps still learning elements of the role, or they're training up to be the next level, they need supervision. And some level of supervision is nearly always required for you to carry out your monitoring duties. So when we talk about health and safety processes being in place, we have the requirement then to monitor them to make sure that they are being carried out by everybody in the company once we've made them aware. And you can't really do that unless you supervise. Normally in person, sometimes with a little bit of support from CCTV and things like that. And that's not a Big Brother culture. It's just about making sure that you have the ability to check in on somebody. So if somebody's working alone, that they're safe. That if something goes wrong, you can check a camera to see where people are. Or it could be for things such as accidents, so retrospectively looking back at something that's happened. So having your CCTV in place will really help you to get a true version of events, and then it will make your corrective measures far more accurate because of a result of that. The other one is communication and consultation, another one that you can do yourself. So you need to be able to demonstrate, as per the Health and Safety at Work Act, that you have communicated with your staff and you have consulted. They're 2 different things. Communication is generally one way. It shows that you have communicated out to your employees your expectation, your policies, risk assessments, any training, toolbox talks, briefings. So any changes in rules, any expectation that you have, you must make sure you communicate it to employees. And if that goes to a team leader or a supervisor, they must be aware that they need to cascade it down through their teams as well. Some things such as who your first aiders are, the HSE poster, which is a legal requirement, something else you can do yourself, just go order one online. evacuation procedure. It is far easier to just have a notice board and to display these things on a notice board so that everyone can see them, but bring it to their attention that there are things on there for them to see. And change around what's on that notice board regularly, because we get sign blind. As soon as something starts looking familiar, we stop checking it. And then consultation. So it's making sure that you have two-way communication in place, which essentially is what consultation is. You have to provide your employees a forum or a means of being able to consult, which means that as well as communicating that way with them, that they get the option to bring things back to the room. That could be concerns, it could be ideas, it could be, well, actually, we've been given a risk assessment to sign this week, but we don't think that it's right, we don't think we can do it. And that's a good challenge. Like, having that feedback from your front of line people it's like gold dust. It's worth so much to you in terms of value. So please don't push back on those challenges when people say, I don't think this is right, or why have we got to do that? And if somebody has come to you and said, well, I don't understand why, they're not going to follow what you've asked them to do, because they don't understand what value it's got, why we do things, why it's important, where the requirement comes from, and how they can contribute and how they can raise their concerns, not just with safety, but with anything that they feel is on their mind. It could be that they think that a colleague has got a drug or an alcohol problem or a mental health illness. And it's really, really important that through building a good culture, you have that open door process there. It can't just be a policy, it has to be ingrained into your culture so that when the need arises, people feel that they are going to be listened to. And that all bleeds back into the line manager being properly trained, because if they go to a line manager that's properly trained, they're going to sit them down and say, okay, let's talk about it. What do you need from me? If they go to a line manager that doesn't understand, that line manager will see it as a problem and may well put you in hot water legally, because they don't understand that they're an extension of the duties of the company. Now, one of the things that I haven't mentioned is that every company must have a competent person for health and safety. It doesn't have to be somebody like me. It can be internal in your organisation. If you feel that you are ready to take on that challenge internally and keep it in-house so that you know what's going on in your business and you want to manage this yourself, I would strongly advise making sure that you have some training to demonstrate that you have the skills, knowledge, experience and training. Then those things that we've mentioned there form competency. So competency isn't just having a training certificate, it's all of those things together. But once you've got the training, you can then go on to build your skills and your experience by doing further research, understanding your business and taking away what we've talked about today and putting those things in place. One of the good courses to look at if you're planning on doing that is something called IOSH Managing Safely. And no, I don't deliver it. I'm just going to go through as a bullet point list the top things that you can do to help yourself without paying anybody else. Get your health and safety policy written up, get your risk assessments in place, make sure you've got training and supervision in place, make sure that you communicate and provide consultation to your employees. And this is all about reducing your risk. So there's so many things there that you can help to reduce yourself, and a little bit of training to help you understand those things always goes a long way. Then what I will say now is if you do feel absolutely petrified by any of this, come to me, ask me the questions, and I will do my best to answer them. So I'll leave that with you. I hope it's been a big help. If there is anything that you think I can help with, or you really do feel like you need some support, come to me. But otherwise, I hope it's been really valuable. And let's get our businesses safe and robust. And when you're all still here in 4, 5, 6, 7 years' time, and you do need a service like me, you know where I am. Take care, guys. Stay safe.